so much about global access, global food ozone depletion, radiation, carbon ozone cooling, the pressures on future global famine, bilateral NFU solves are inducing impetus for China's mobilization and prevents security to allow spillovers to India, Pakistan, South Korea, Pakistan, nuclear stockpile, and Russia's posturing after 16 times more vessels are intended to counter useless defense to Delhi during China, good counterforce to advantage for the anti-secret result of India, tied by subversive to China, the eject race was MD mobilization rumors, this reaction, in fact, China's college in the state despite faster state counter leadership posture, motivates India and in terms of from the boosters filed in India. And Pakistan is driven by Beijing and Washington. China's mobilization indicates leaders for its forces grow global leaders for especially against China. As an NEG US adopts the reason crisis parallel to 5% due to dispute could release Islam for China refreshing pleasure does harm the bilateral NEG China take outcomes India China Pakistan the bilateral NEG agreements with strengthening stability in Asia.
Yeah, 8 seconds.
I've never finished this one easy.
You were doing it.
I'm up at that, but
Good for Gabriel.
yes.
Okay. The plan adopted a nuclear no first use policy restricting the first use of nuclear forces. Post-plan, could we ever use first against China?
No.
No, there's no circumstance where we could use first against China. What does it mean restricting first use?
It means banning nuclear first use.
Okay, so you will defend there is no circumstance.
Well, for
I'm watching
Like, if you read
like
a DA, right? But if you read a counterplan that picks out like
whoa, hold on. You've defended the plan X. You've defined it this way. Will you
that's
commit now?
That's distinct from the purposes of counterplan competition. We'll defend that the plan is certain and immediate for the purposes of DAs, but like we don't think that makes your counterplans competitive.
Okay, so there is a world where the plan could result in, where after the plan, the US could first strike China.
the do the plan, if we consult someone, counterplan is like not competitive, is what we are saying. But we think if the plan is implemented, we will tell China there are no circumstances under which we can restrict it.
Okay, sure. The crisis stability advantage. Actually, no, let's talk about the relations advantage. So all of your cards, the newest ones, 2023, none of this assumes Kim's recent moves where he said reunification is no longer a goal, altered the Constitution. Why does he give a crap about reunification or de-escalation measures? He's tested an underwater nuclear drone. Like, why does he care?
That's all uniqueness for the AFF. Our evidence says that Kim is uniquely responsive to Chinese pressure because they're their largest trading partner.
Okay, but he has been moving away from China towards Russia. He's been selling them weapons. They've been supplying them grain. Why is China key?
For the same reasons that we've identified, largest trading partner, also the largest source of energy for North Korea. Our evidence indicates that historically China's willingness to negotiate over the future of its nuclear program has waxed and waned with China's permissiveness of sanctions.
Okay, that was the other thing I wanted to ask about. Why would the plan mean China gets on board with sanctioning North Korea?
Issues are linked in this context because they're both nuclear. Our evidence indicates the plan would make China more receptive for other demands for nuclear stability in the region.
Okay, sure. I guess that makes a little sense. The modernization advantage. First card says Chinese modernization is inevitable. It's just a question of speed. The second card is like if they integrate AI, that's really bad. Why, if it's inevitable, will they not at some point integrate AI?
Well, their motivation for integrating AI is because they fear a no warning strike by the U.S. AI would increase their responsiveness to that and improve their early warning system. Evidence says it's linked to the pace of their early warning thing. Obviously, there are dangers to doing it, so it's not something that they affirmatively want to do unless they feel like they're pressured by first strike posture.
Okay. And so the one issue solvency claim is they then will no longer decide to integrate AI.
Yeah, our evidence at the bottom of the one you see says that the plan would restore China's historic go slow approach to modernization, which enables them to prioritize safety over speed.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, 102%, it is 6. And then the case in your price stability, modernization related. Then, I don't know if you wanted like your modern back. You want this more back?
Thank you.
No worries.
Thanks very much.
Can you start? Yep. We got it. All three. First off, energy covers all countries after 21. Any US government that don't use against any arbitrary or any violation of the plan only does an NEG with China voted for limits, strategy, precision, infinite numbers of subset NC modifications, big app changes, key to next offense and in-depth research next off.
The United States should increase nuclear contingency planning by at least incorporating conventional planning with South Korea. Integrated conventional planning into nuclear consultation creates an assured sweet spot of success. Hinged on a critical commitment to Adult 21. Although many suggest the source came back, they do not imply we can guarantee is correct surveys found individuals like ABC. Credible guarantees also super bill sweet spot they do cover concern about recognizing can take away prescription applied by the below. The level used when responding not just really with nukes with threats such as conquest back to coercion like in tricky US nukes and nuclear planning naval convention assurance by clarifying naval circumstances which USB used problem can be avoided while showing the capability and allied assurance is stable post Biden NPR before interviews Doctrine 21 or Doctrine 23. John's allied assurance and new representation interviewed experts received US command to security is credible and strongly not. The US never nuclear capabilities used to not change. Policy and NPR allies were quite relieved for cracks in the short European grow more serious and China interview shreds allied assurance first East Asian Polo Central 20. US energy policy with little strength and stability along with assurance includes nuclear conventional means no longer US reassurance to allies compensate for NPU plus for China but pledge by contributing nuclear polo and weaken every US agree. Difficulty explaining to allies to use nuclear polos market away for Chinese declaration to expect would hold in prices transfixation China the US much to do with more space attached to get a US commitment to not use nukes against China conventional ops like Korea but not set against Japan and Taiwan get the Chinese sufficient US attaches. In exchange for Beijing will land US pledge much more explanation for fictitious China and NPU China's interest in weakening US alliances and new nuclear states increased risk of accidents, preemptive war, and miscalculated conflict from misinformation, biases, or combined risk ranges for their each. The newspaper says that members of their programs create war Saudi and Turkey contemplate concern over reliability extended deterrent generate nukes among Japan, Korea, or Germany access to preemptive war and intensify your going state evidence. Hero comments for rational actions indicated to provide apology states basic most for adversaries misinformation, small arsenals, and survival retain command factors and combination generate risk next off. The United States should upgrade nuclear forces survivability, command and control, communication systems, set risk reduction teams within their defense establishment, not use nuclear weapons first, empower negotiating team, and work with the Democratic People's Republic of Korea to negotiate for the new relationship, complete denuclearization, and establishment of peace in the Korean Peninsula, cooperate with South Korea, China, and Japan to offer humanitarian assistance to DPRK, coordinate with allies, and China the reciprocal steps and assurances in exchange for DPRK denuclearization, RIT, solve miscalculated crisis stability act in 18. They can only sometimes tragedy given poor relations, geological measures, the only feasible side of crisis stability against shorter warning immediate by misperception of intention or the intention of decision making is a difficulty assessing intention, course restraint, and counter escalation measures, catalyze peace preparation, and survivability that reduce agents and incidental strikes, and mitigate the escalation risk resulting from the devastation window, during crisis device, leading on risk association with integrity and peace, and ensuring that escalation risk effective and world planning for strategic weapons, could assess alternatives and propose other options to object, and the counterplan solves denuclearization, even if that fails, builds diplomacy to avoid conflict, and 21 years of diplomacy sanction, even military force entry, there's no separable best option persistent state diplomacy, perfect robust assurance, no Pyongyang no longer, most of the no complete advanced programs may see multiple re-entry vehicle capability can strike the US, Japan, South Korea for these options. For these, the recent diplomacy should be top priority by the commitment to diplomacy to operations and circle momentum leadership, empower negotiating team to build working towards a new relationship between negotiation peace and finance and cooperating with South China, Japan, all humanitarian systems with confidence and generate positive atmosphere negotiation, farming signals, reduce provocations, coordination, coordinate efforts and stakes to shape behavior. This should strengthen existing stakes while laying out reciprocal steps on stakes relief in exchange for efforts to freeze and eliminate programs and by Pyongyang to help build initiatives, build confidence, increase integration in the global arena. Next off, a bilateral NFU is an implicit threat of use against Iran since they were explicitly left off the list instead of countries that emphasize freedom and as a basis for military strategy and not thinking probability to argue that like many of you do not make sense. US went first, we used first for more than nevertheless, Turkish participants still supported absence of NFUs being first use to NFU. Directed only in China will increase credibility of use to threats against Russia, Iran, and North Korea. Pointedly by that level, the NFU list and perception of increasing threats against Iran, cause regional pressure power, rumor and rumors 23 Iran, beyond resuscitation, by giving objects and POA shifted away from company, plan B, hitting military pressure on Iran instead, plan C to prevent war outcomes and nuclear standard powers, and possibility of return. We're resolving into the future to prevent and running about avoid escalation that comes by impressions of circles that messages for burning worst case war in the Middle East, and Iran war draws into great nuclear great powers cause extinction every aggressive modification has been in a full world war. If it started, might develop a World War III runs. Allied with Russian attack could escalate into a large-scale war. Pakistan might be overthrown, introducing new Russia. China might destroy into general war. Nuclear war would be damage. Global ag, destroy civilization, the biosphere. Next off. The United States should declare that no first use policy restricting the first use of its nuclear forces against the People's Republic of China is the goal of the United States and work to put in place. The United States should declare a no first use policy restricting the first use of its nuclear forces against the People's Republic of China is the goal of the United States and work to put in place conditions that allow adoption, direct and internal studies that identifies conditions that allow adoption and implement those policies which would facilitate adoption of no first use policy restricting the first use of its nuclear forces against the People's Republic of China, establish a consultative mechanism with allies identifying implementing conditions that make adoption consistent with US and allied security interests, develop a list of circumstances that warrant consideration of a nuclear response and non-nuclear attack, and adopt a first use policy that makes it clear that it is significantly more limited than the 2018 nuclear posture review. The kind of address the short-term risk of first use building a process of learning to allow eventual NFU adoption. The plans abrupt change provokes backlash to destroy solvency and collapse assurance to destroy 21. The adversary elevated defense by non-nuclear technology support NEG limited experts when adopting includes senior members of the current admin and Pentagon Starcom State on what has overruled key advisors' decision could be reversed for inject unpredictability and including fears of allies adopting NEG and other right choices because of time possessed. To demonstrate donation rule of nukes make clear circumstances US would consider use of nukes are more limited than 2018 NPR never rule out not wish to undermine deterrence given greater communist nuke responsibility ruled out include non-nuclear attacks with efforts approaching nuclear attacks that threaten a continued existence signaling high pressure for use by and demonstrate rule of nukes is extremely limited if the US and allies common non-nuclear capabilities specific makes sense to give up first use declaration would be anti-radical unless accompanied by action stabilize the strategic relationship with China and Russia enhancing NATO and allied capabilities improve the resilience of NCP making NFU goal policies research for use may be given adequately study field by notices to make eventual change sustainable cut it at sustainable go to the crisis ability advantage plan is not mutual NFU and is totally unpreventable. A declaration exchanges fail prevents bodies funding one China may more potential capabilities including potential declaration that reduction weapons would be relatively easy as a PC to push NFU will leave little time to overcome resistance to alter force posture PC ways if that force posture remains the same changes in force posture critical components B their own credit card says mutual trust is a prerequisite MCU's agree IA21. Makes no sense to clear NMU unless among political trust resolves to share adversary trust each other's favor argues the choice has between the two countries political belief remains most critical first step. C no trust between either nations. 12 is spirals of mistrust ties in 221. Trusted rock bottom Washington believe that China undermined current international order U.S. China's rise over their leadership using a certain convinced senior officials assumptions were wrong. Those China's revisions they keep lying and cheating making use of business and gravity between words and actions for time while violating commitments on television consists control tech not valid. Robert Lynn herd economy and threat legitimacy spiral mission systems alive as them double down on signal covers all foreign ministry calling U.S. empire U.S. empire lies and no U.S. China war mark 23 Asia Pacific I don't think it's not China. Fully Japan Central Taiwan Philippines India I don't think it's a living regional U.S. China calling integration of supply chain remains China. Reactor cover real estate summit other issues endangered future launching a wartime strategies in which CCP has a crisis of legitimacy, cut it at legitimacy, and Biden will first strike Jackson 22. The no appointees serving by the allies for nuclear purposes, Biden suggests over percent arms control and appoint arms control. Biden stretches ability posture to the primacy not nukes but conventional, while Biden examines version undertaking actions that make the crisis more plausible, leaving stability more to chance of private restraint. And Sweeney is speculation about Taiwan concerns capabilities of the plan do not affect that they're not affected by the plan and from a Chinese perspective. MSU's agree Sweeney's one of it. Generally affect the real possibility to
Assert that and go to modernization.
assert that modernization. Chinese modernization is independent of U.S. actions resistance between nuclear weapon not yet. Undermine U.S. ability to turn nuclear attacks to dramatic cases, nuclear modifications, assessment analysts maintain that China's focus on shared retaliation, consider whether public sources epicurely referee Chinese nuclear thinking, rest of subject continuity, understanding filtered through the Chinese G. See anti-value posture China PLA, eager to consider different direction, change may be already on market systems desire to require range capabilities of China rise of leaders. Makes important on showing up gaps American observers assuming U.S. is a single focus on Chinese defense planning to lead a region inhabited by India, Noko, and Russia. Implication is used to restrain agenda China's restraint with restraint time when U.S. Chinese behavior is passive Chinese developments are motivated and outright not just by missile defense conventional strikes, but also desires to sustain and communicate China's status. U.S. need not be concerned that efforts will trigger arms race and no Chinese launch on warning until 22. Alternative Chinese forces skeptical Beijing will shift to LW posture. CCP always assists attack control from capabilities given risk escalation and stability to trust military. CCP unlikely to redelegate launch authority to CMC or even sole authorities to CCP because the risk is likely Beijing will choose this even if it appears to be to prepare for it. China's oriented towards deterrence and more than fighting. It makes sense eventually not willingness to launch a deter adversaries, although they would not execute such operations in case even an extremist and no
insert the military I think I'm gonna
global causes make military AI inevitable. Insert there the relations advantage. No deal impossible to cheat or ignore murder in 23. The two sides return to negotiations talking about halted activities and China, Libya, Syria, U.S. failed to sign the lesson of vision. The lesson from history is limited nuclear deals not working only delay eventual expansion programs and they have zero add that Biden would trade the plan for China's cooperation. On NOCO, Biden's committed to ignoring them. Rogan in 23. Biden's policy navigation with Pyongyang and like any of diplomatic initiative contributed to say Biden stated there were open negotiations with no preconditions and outsiders on policy saying we're open to both pathways. There's no visible research talks and no North Korean war challenge one. Because that's why years ago, NOCO were integrating conflict answering and other experience over 40 plus years as no U.S. commitment, USFK and UNC maintaining the strength has worked every reason. Cut that last part of every reason.
We're going to prep for a second. 10 minutes. Okay. 9:35. You ready?
Yep.
Status of the off.
Conditional status quo is always a logical option.
You kick planks.
We can kick
Well,
sections of
Yeah, let me explain this too. So the advantage counter plan is where we can kick planks, the condition, actually, yeah, we can kick planks. The advantage counterplan where it says like plank 1, plank 2, that's what it is. If they're like subsets, no.
Assurance DA, uniqueness counterplan, increasing nuclear contingency planning by incorporating conventional planning. What does that mean?
Yeah, so the Sukin and Dalton evidence says that the ways in which we should sort of integrate conventional and nuclear is by sort of enhancing the credibility of nuclear deterrence by shifting to contingency planning. So there's like a line that's like, below the level U.S. is willing to respond or not to turn with nukes, threats backed by coercion likely to trigger U.S. nukes. So we think the threat of nuclear use is credible, but if those are supplanted by conventional, it solves your warrants about why deterrence is dead because we would never use them.
Okay, under what circumstances would using a nuclear weapon against China improve Allied security?
I'm like confused by the question.
What's like the situation where an ally would want us to nuke China?
Well, so there's a litany of potential like ways China could encourage North Korea to aggress against South Korea, allies in Asia. Those are like one example. There's a potential we don't think invasion of Taiwan is likely, but there is a potential where China could increase aggression along the South China Sea and trigger allies to be concerned, and they might, ask the United States for a first strike. There are others.
Conditional NFU counterplan is a likely outcome of the counterplan NFU against China.
A likely outcome, but only when the conditions for doing so are just in terms of like military advisors and such.
So allies does every ally in East Asia get a veto?
Well, I don't think we've specified whether they get a veto. It's a consultative mechanism about whether or not allies get to, allies identify the conditions in which an NFU towards China should be adopted, which, they would not necessarily get a veto, but they would get to sort of voice their input.
Okay, and that would properly resolve their concerns, is that correct?
Yeah.
Doing this, okay. The last plank, curious to me, make it clear, so adopt a policy that is more limited than the 2018 NPR. So that means ruling out first use in certain circumstances?
I don't think so.
So what that plank is talking about is kind of in line with those conditions, right? The way this would function is if the conditions are met, part of that guidance, you then would reference that in conjunction with what previous NPRs have said, right? Previous NPRs have said there are certain things. The counterplan is now recognizing that U.S. posture is changing away from those NPRs.
Okay, but
right, like
the
NPR said,
counterplan, so it immediately narrows the circumstances?
It immediately announces the goal of having a no first use policy with China restricting first use, and then if certain circumstances are met, and it works about determining those circumstances. If those circumstances are then met, then it results in an NFU.
We're prepping 935. Uh, 758, yep.
order? Yeah. Are we good for order? Advantage 1, which is price stability. Advantage 2, which is modernization and then bargaining. Topicality. The multi-plank advantage counterplan. The conditional NFU counterplan. The ICC disadvantage. The Iran disadvantage. And then the program disadvantage.
We're ready.
Okay. Hold on, I gotta label. Okay, good. Okay.
1C1 NFU is credible. 1 principle, China and U.S. are both committed to NFU by the Taipei doctrine. That's I. 2 Chinese officials. Regular debates on the intensity by which officials defend their NFU proves it shapes Chinese doctrine. That's done. Inserted for reference. 3 dialogue. The plan is followed up with confidence building measures that fit Benji and Gomberg. 4 relations. The plan still improves them even if incredible because it looks like an olive branch to China. That's countrymen. 5 no U.S. use even if not credible. The plan fiat's no first use having the risk of conflict. Their next argument is the plan builds trust. That's why it advocates. That's why Ricardo advocates for NFU even if mutual trust is behind the status quo. That also answers the next argument. That's relations low is uniqueness for the advantage. They say no China war or that assumes generic checks and still says there's a high risk of war because of either to lose it or accidental conflict because both sides have LOW or adopting modern, destabilizing modernized postures. They say by the way, first strike, 1 audience costs. But if China attacks a carrier in a U.S. conventional conflict, then there would be audience costs to strike them. 2 future presidents would be more aggressive. Sweeney isn't just speculation and they didn't read the cards, so you shouldn't give it credit for them. The other advantage, China Law, they say China Law is independent of U.S. actions. That's wrong. Survivability concerns are why they modernize and adopt LOW. Otherwise, they wouldn't have any excuse to modernize those arsenals because they have no offensive utility. They say no LOW. Yes, they want to increase survivability. It lowers decision time for launch, which reduces the risk of a U.S. first strike. They said insert. We didn't read that piece of evidence, and they dropped the India-Pakistan scenario that it causes war and extinction, which was the scenario that they didn't get to because they went to the third advantage too fast. Advantage 3. They say no-co deal impossible. Yes, deal. China doesn't want nuclear no-co, but doesn't want to co-op with the U.S. without concessions. They say Biden wouldn't trade. Yes, we've already made the concession to cooperating with China is a no-cost option. They say no-co war. They would use nukes to gain an edge in a conventional conflict and show resolve. That miscalculation will draw the U.S. in because we're still committed to South Korea. Now, topicality. We need. Kinetic says NFU. Counter-reserve asks to be by multilateral geographical limits have to no first use up your agreement with one of our governments or unilateral addition might be general specific and you can find a geographical bilateral agreement will be between the U.S. and China. It's not certain or policy definition like Hurricane 81. DoD officials made the point in strategic policy distinguish two different meanings of the word policy and the actions that serve as guidelines which will impact government actions in the third sense or refers to policy statements which have political backs. Rosa doesn't contrast and or picks every app and limit out would be a pick under their interpretation. There are more vigorous entry to create an entire app and one pick. Second is innovation. There are 5 apps in their intro, but unlimited subs and disarm aren't viable. They make debates in Northwestern, the city of the MBT, which shields education, functional limits, solvency advocates, generics, check limits, explosion, reasonability, vote after for intro allows a year of sustainable debates. Otherwise, topicality does have an opportunity to cost the introduction, so there should be a higher threshold. Advanced counterplan. 1 permutation, do both. 2 permutation, do the counterplan. 3 permutation, do the plan. In every combination of planks, group the first 3 planks. Systems are buildable now. Modernization insufficient. Code in 23. Russia and China targeted big facilities that are incentivized high capabilities until they reuse so true. Extend cyber unknown by continues to modernize CNC. It entails integration of ML and other emerging tech despite the Dutch time for modernizing. You have to achieve non-use Biden and any feature leader slower change launch on attack there. This is inadequate given prolific cyber attack limits and biases with ML systems. The next blank is never used first. It doesn't solve advantage 2 and 3 because those are about China's perceptions that the US will use first. So simply not using first doesn't resolve those perceptions. Current counterplan, not responding to threats is the equivalent of an NFU policy. Penofsky in 97 are restricting nuclear forces. The question continues whether this could be or a policy restricting the nuclear world and responding to nuclear threats is only the de facto equivalent of no first use policy. The strategic stability plans, U.S. commitment first is key to progress in talks. China would say no to everything without the AFF. Locking 20 NFU was best second point for talking between China and U.S. for taking China. The next for the U.S. for commitment is made. The U.S. commitment to NFU is essential for progress in talks. U.S. like China is not willing to engage, but U.S. officials are making this modernizing request. It says significant disincentive. No-co wouldn't and China wouldn't get on board with that. The U.S. making that request
policy and no one can get aboard with just U.S. pressure because we're sanctioning them now. The conditional line of view counterplan, it links to every net benefit because it narrows conditions for first use, especially the last plank, which is immediate and unconditional. 2, perm do both. 3, perm do the AFF and adopt measures that facilitate it, that shields the dissent, that Texas and adopt. Perm do the last plank, it's the way the plan could be done. Perm do the counterplan. Should is not certain for counterplans. Pfeiffer in 1 should means must, exceptional cases. Another possible interpretation that should is meant to leave some discretion. Allies, the U.S. would say no. Per Convention 21, and if you, the PC, of personally spend efficiency through this is really little opponents, including both amongst Congress, produce quotes from military leaders who change through the president, we can national security, Russia, China, the enemy face pressure from democratic members of Congress, allied governments with correct and duty of extreme circumstances would make leaders or China think the U.S. recognition need to use more readily than an action blow China needs to arguably low declared U.S. threshold for first use, just by building up their unveiling, either versus safety or for fewer being serious first use. Every research focused on the review doesn't mean there are indeed some serious which first use to be final option for the U.S. to defeat amateurs on nuclear aggression. Certainty and clarity is key. 7 and 10. U.S. long-threatened first use against China would make sense to president may be U.S. viewpoints before changing for policies necessary to transparent and vote and increase the policy made by which reception or suspicion of use may have to make sure for others that it's reliable and irreversible. The net benefit is nonsense, not substantiated by a piece of evidence. The ICC this ad. The ICC engagements in Ukraine undermines justice and they don't do anything. Winter in 2-6, the ICC is blocked and to report blocking Ukraine's efforts to have a special revealed try Russian leadership. The ICC prosecutes crimes they propose in special attributed against self-interest to report the institution that seems both the ICC shirts means the plural that but the government rich on the idea of particular institutions trying competitions on really appalling based on deadlock on whether said a special ad hoc tribunal separate from the ICC's findings so although ICC in charge of individuals not jurisdiction over Russian crimes and charge is not according to their own statute. Thumpers 1 Ukraine during War 23 Biden signaled the certain acts of violence were not tolerated. There's been Russian Washington builders wanting Ukraine medical falling Biden for sharing evidence impossible for more crimes put that in the unity narrative marked narrative 2 Afghanistan, Chafan in 21 military officials told Morbeck they recommended 2,500 troops remain in Afghanistan. Trump contradicted Biden military chairman of the JCS acknowledged they agreed that 2,500 troops be left in the country full of withdrawal lead to the collapse of Afghan forces, market forces, no spillover. War in 23 started to think of a relationship building stronger foundation by takes hosted by Sealing while Austin expresses aberration police with the president's decision mind has been political arena for decades. Doesn't feel needed to prove himself by saying depending on all the time. The president has experienced standing confident. Austin has done well demanding strong ties with Biden's fighting president's system of the defense establishment, market establishment. The ICC is ineffective. No, I'm going to go to Iran. The link is incoherent. Telling one state we will not persuade them doesn't cause other states to think we're about to attack. Your link evidence says it makes threats more credible about the U.S. isn't threatening Iran and the status quo. NSA stumped the link with not threatening one country sufficient to make the rest scared. Our threats should already be credible because we're already committed to non-nuclear weapon states. Iran's scared now. Watson 11 was going to conduct the second step, which strikes our facilities for retaliation for U.S. forces in Iraq. Watson said strikes were conducted in the direction of the U.S. is fully prepared to take further necessary measures to protect our people. Iranian aggression is impossible. Black 21. Iranian Germany's by league saturated. The capacity dominates region GDP is $439 billion compared to $1.5 trillion. GCC evidence votes 3% to the military than Iran 8. Saudi spent 5 times around those sharp to favor Arab states, Mark Arab states. No Middle East wars getting in 22 negative conflicts. The US was unable to resolve side states are relying on for offense regional wars that they against each other in Iran on the pandemic and e-commerce wars were unsustainable states. Normally relations, many trends demonstrate a more fluid environment. The pro-lift is at 1 from do both. The combination should assure South Korea since it's not mutually exclusive with the plan. It also doesn't assure South Korea because of other factors like a future president and all of our uniqueness evidence. South Korea pro-lift now. Kim in 24 with dozens of these no-goes or sort of repeat threats launch instrument test so South Korea's open bacon American style US president would hesitate to use these defense South known good name to kill wounds with the topic of retaliation and sense of nation acquiring atomic weapons sold prefer nukes of their own. Trump suggested the alliance with strange actually South Korea with Kim to Soko. They built these 40 American troops no matter how Trump committed fighting South America first being the next president for a prime can become a mere scrap of paper of nights more revealing to no-goes advancements and Ukraine's showing Soko we don't want the nation as a fellow country not the nuclear enemy. Conventional solves but nuclear assurance fails. Found 24 improvements in conventional abilities to balance out South Korea the benefits of Russian South Korea competency U.S. guarantees has wanted Trump force solely from an ally with the isolationist tendency the president retains all their ally be certain Western will use in case they believe in their certain nuclear assurance not only fails to address society's but tools that assurance can provide resolve or provide officials with an expectation about when the U.S. might use a weapon. Marked a weapon. Nuclear guarantees increase support for pro-lift. 1, control, Stupek in 20, yes, credibility of nuclear guarantees increase support for acquisition will also increase as willingness to use weapons, but the greatest concerns that to avoid nuclear use and to exact control over nuclear decision making to know the no longer deliver the trigger figure of an allied effect is increased support for Poland by 1.8 points. It affects are significant. 2 salience. They cause pro-nuclear factions to win battle. 23, increasing salience to weapon station may backfire. Healing risk by reinforcing the fiction that the alliance is better than nukes. It shows the intrusive faction of and such weapons. Raise salience only increasing allies and anxieties. The goal should be to ensure security is not found on U.S. nuclear lines that depends on nuclear assurance to speak. 3, credibility. Bluffing about it reduces cred. White 18 doesn't acknowledge vulnerability and otherwise credibility of Asian allies. Commitments are only credible if allies believe America is willing to fight wars to fulfill them. America must convince its willing to endure attacks and eliminate paths of vulnerability when on record believe commitments. But what is whistling past the record when vulnerability is so evidently a reality, refusing to believe the U.S. and not willing to separate that undermines alliances. First strike is in key. Blair in 16, study finds out really Republican thinking among allies. These first 2 critical defense of the threat has been starting to be reluctant. Marked it reluctant. I'm ready for questions.
Okay. Conditional NFU, U.S. says no. I understand that you fiat the United States, but why does this just not take out the entire case, considering if you haven't made a universality argument in this way, Steve?
Well, because we durably fiat that the plan doesn't get rolled back.
Well, why does that mean they can't be irreversed by a future administration?
Because we fiat that they can't.
Oh, okay. So
I understand.
yeah, no, I get it. I want to talk about the case.
Are you confused by their question or my answer? Okay, sorry.
Anyway, so number 3 on credible, what dialogue does the U.S. and China have post U.S. NFU?
Dialogue over denuclearizing North Korea and crisis.
Why does that make an NFU credible?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're asking.
So why does that still trust? Yeah.
It would say, like, we would clarify what our position would be on like certain regional conflicts, or say like, if we think you're about to imminently like strike our boat, here's what we would do.
And the only reason China believes that is because we've declared we have an NFU with them with no operational changes?
Yeah, we have like 3 cards that say that NFU is the first step to negotiations. It's what China keeps asking for, and that
I guess,
follows
like, I think you know what I'm getting at here. Like, why does China
what-
believe in NFU in a world we have not altered our nuclear posture at all? Like, we have said a word, we have not, like, I want, why are words in action?
Because China keeps asking for it, and because we haven't said that word yet.
So, I don't think that answers my question. Why does China exclusively believe that a NFU not coupled with alterations to the nuclear arsenal is a credible reduction of the nuclear force and posture towards China?
For 5 reasons that I listed in my yes credit.
That's not a warrant. Like, can you like,
Because they're both, our evidence says that they're both committed to that China believes the U.S. would be committed because of things like the nuclear taboo and the doctrines that we passed in our NFU. The second, our done evidence says that Chinese officials regularly debate what an NFU means and trust that the U.S. would be on board, which is our done evidence. The third is the potentially doctrine evidence.
You're just like saying, you're not answering the question. That's fine. I
All
want
those
to
are answers.
No, they're not. Watson, on the Iran DA, this card is just like, Iran, like, we did a bunch of strikes in Iran and Iran was like scared. Like, why does this answer the link?
The premise of your link argument is that by saying NFU to China, Iran thinks we're about to strike them. We have actually struck Iran with conventional weapons. That is far greater of a trigger to your link and makes Iran far more scared than saying we aren't going to first strike China.
Okay, why does the U.S. using conventional weapons in the Middle East that we've done for like decades matter more to Iran than the U.S.
Why?
explicitly declaring that it will not use first against some countries, but leaves the open possibility of first use against Iran?
Because ambiguity is the status quo. Because we say we leave.
Yeah, the plan removes ambiguity. The plan removes ambiguity in the context of Iran.
Iran is still totally ambiguous. We have left open the possibility of using these weapons.
Ambiguous by declaring we wouldn't first strike somebody, but would first strike others?
The plan clarifies the ambiguity that we will not use first against China, but that you have not read a piece of evidence that says that causes Iran to freak out.
10 minutes, reasons to reject the team, there weren't any.
There were not. Okay.
550. Oh. Do a different work. Advantage counter plan, ICC flow, condition, alternate view counter plan, crisis stability, modernization, no stuff. Yeah, of course. Advantage counter plan, wherever you were flowing the stuff they talked about with ICC, the conditional and a view counter plan, the crisis stability advantage, the modernization advantage, and then the no-go relation, / China relation no-go advantage. Okay, yeah, whatever you call that. Okay. Anybody not ready? Kansas? Counterplan solves the entire case. You should do this eventually. Deficit has to be compared to the score, not the affirmative, because when a logical policymaker would obviously choose the more preferable option, not the, or would choose a better option than status quo, not necessarily the best overall option, which means if the dissent has any risk of outweighing the case, it obviously outweighs the distant preference of mutual solvency. Now, they really mishandled the counterplan. Plank 1, functionally dropped. They read a uniqueness argument for us if our home card indicates systems of vulnerabilities. Exactly, that's the solvency advocate for the first plank, because they did the counterplan fiats improving the survivability of those things, addressing the system vulnerabilities, etc., which was all miscalculation for their own analysis. Now, the second plank, it was straight drop. It engages with risk reduction teams where the U.S. goes in and Alice basically has a risk reduction team, which is independent analysts, come in, do a negotiation process, and analyze all the system weaknesses for both the ways that miscalculation occur, but also reasons why China will perceive modernization as destabilizing miscalculation occur, etc. The action evidence is so specific on this question, they dropped it. No deficit indicates it creates a new perception of how our allies view our posture, which means it's less destabilizing with all miscalculation, crisis, instability. It also then says that those results are shared with adversaries, which means they understand our nuclear posture, which obviously stop them from modernizing, etc. Organizational reform is better than the plan. Acting in an anti-most proposition after the risk reduction level organizational reform, like isolation, and heavily leadership of assessing the intentions of the vessel, such as gold, and simple and specialist, says one of the strategic program, united for resolution, including group of advisors, insiders, go, NEG, Maso, 19 risk reduction teams, right approach, forming interagency team, that's with the mandate, to keep the bureaucracy focused. Now, the next argument, they extend the no-use plank. They said it doesn't solve perceptions. That's fine. It does stop U.S. first use, which is the entire scenario of the first thing. I'll answer the permanent the counterplan warrant in a second, but it's not responsive because the counterplan literally just fiats the U.S. does not use first. It is not a policy. It is not a restriction. It just is like a mindset change that nobody really knows. I.e., Biden goes up, there's like, oh, we might use a nuclear weapon, and then he chooses not to, which is something that you all understand, and they did not. Lastly, the no-go plank. They just said China or something would say no. The Kim card says they would say yes, and engages in the kind of sanctions dialogue, etc., that they want, which is the reason why they would get on board. Also, Brian said allies, which means it obviously is a little better because it allows for comprehensive sanction packages, including South Korea, Japan. And it also fiats was, or it says it will result in denuclearization, which was a drop warrant, which means it solves better than the advantage because they said we should just sanction them, but we sanction them and have an internal link to why bringing China and allies in the fold is able to better solve for denuclearization, which means it's all better than the case. Now, to clean up stuff, perm to both, obviously, the plan is an NFU, the counterplan is not. That is a clear distinction. You can vote on permanent the counterplan. Obviously, severance, the only plank you could actually talk about was the third, but it's wrong there. It obviously severs. The resolution requires positive state fiat restricting the forces and adopt an NFUD. The counterplan explicitly negates state action and not use nuclear weapons first. Here's a bunch of definitions. They adopt your option or date for establishing a formal way to be NFU is exactly legislation or XO. Senator Office will not proliferation of NFUs. Adopted in policy and national legislation or present issue executive order. C policy delivered. Course of action on a single CGM for civil life and more policy. No restriction between individuals and policies. Principal course of action on the the process of government the policy to decide principle. Do the crimes never occur. Second is restrict requires law. We're not really restricting limited access to law. Their own part agrees the counterplan is not a restriction. I mean, referencing it here with Greens, you know, but independently voting on T, they said conditions that this is untopical, fastened 63 and over posing no circumstances used for political weapon, vote A, act conditionality, encourages bad play, right? And to see sandbagging moved often for their own process explanation to limit condition for restricting the first use are infinite, every country, region, city, contingency, adversary, and geographic blocks under any use condition, those grounds use, negative counterplans by shifting, encouraging it after research done for negative generics. They justify the don't use first avoid in Japan, half when North Korea invades South Korea, which obviously there's no good ground to. Lastly, precision discards from the Federal Academy of Nuclear Scientists or experts in nuclear policy and establish individual stake's point. Now, the last cover my bases, they said the Kluge cards say no, this is not in reference to any plan of the counterplan. We did not talk about strategic stability dialogue, and they concede, and they dropped that when we tell adversaries the results of the risk reduction team, that is not something they were required to say no to. The only other thing it could be in relation to the NOCO thing, they dropped explicit a card in the one in C, but I'll read another card as you don't need the magic words of interviews, out of interview, recommendation, interview, performance, discussion, about assumption, the channel press, interviews, mistaken, open dialogue with them. Washington altering its policy discussion of first being set, understand, watch, reduce the risk of perception, translation, difference, and credibility, legal requisite, interpolate, visual, legal issue, discussion, what about any policy change, instead of negotiate, interview, for discussion, develop, you don't have this, money, control, conventions, of the best person. Risk reduction. Hold the line, like, they dropped basically all these plans. Go to the ICC thing. We can read these this ad, but the cards they run to help us. It's a reason why risk reduction teams are good, i.e. the military is engaging in different kinds of behaviors now that are illogical, but risk reduction teams solve those factors, which means it solves that way better and conventional than if you can see the permutation, just a constant talk of competition, they didn't have any offense, and there's no reason to reject the team, crisis is with. At the top, these answers are terrible. No one would believe it if you supplement A if they drop the declaratory postures to fail. It doesn't matter if things like officials or dialogue are concluded because no one would believe them and would ignore the dialogue proven by their own say no card on the other page. Second is mutual trust. Be ready re-highlighting of their card, which says a prerequisite to leading the interview is the foundation of mutual trust. And then read a card from 2 weeks ago that says the China and the US do not believe each other on anything, which is zero the case because it means that they would never, ever believe in an interview, even if officials came in, even if their relations, etc. Their only out is to say we solve the first advantage because we don't fiat use, that's fine, but you definitely don't solve the crisis stability part of it, i.e. China perceiving it, which is why they would go to war. You definitely don't solve the modernization advantage, and they would never agree to your cooperation on North Korea, so the case starts at zero. Now, I'll read one more card because there's a cure that can only go negative. Also, 21 private cases of leader recognized issue of false leader false in the math and simple fact that leaders have an interlude of absolute leader false in sexual leaders surrender comments in person, you resent one of my best friends, choice applicants for one of the plus defenders most easily, allowing to work when they are needed. The China war thing. Concede, no China War. 1, internal issues, China preoccupied with most problems like economic slumps, internal legitimacy crisis. Forward, only compound problems to get back to superior to Mars. Even the prospect of defeat is sufficient to deter risk of perceived. Return 20 visas to choose, watch carefully, but included administration on triple custody, identity, would be complex generation, and program, your woman's level. Leader fan given black Chinese complex experience, you understand for a second, economics, it was dropped. 4, 25 global sanctions, they look like AG is actively aware of China's incorporating independence from food, oil, family, semiconductors, whatever the confidence in the Mars, global backlash, and sanctions disturbed, like it was 23 war from Taiwan, strategy, strategy, after markets reduce country dependent on oil food and some technical power and data space with global extension helping get the military forces after conflict with economy definitely. The party victory you will only sell other options taken. Recklessly. Lastly, no risk of first striking by it. They conceded basically the fundamental warrant, i.e. they have said audience and costs, etc. That doesn't answer our argument, which is Biden himself doesn't want to be perceived as escalatory. He would never engage in a first strike because he views it in the wrong way, proven by conflicts in the Middle East, etc. He's been taking careful analysis and actions to avoid the escalation threshold, also proven by Ukraine, and none of this post-dates their evidence by a year and a half. It's a reason why our evidence is new president specific. They said future president, this equal applies to them. It would be a reason adversaries wouldn't perceive it as credible because they would leave after Biden and they would roll it back. Modernization advantage. Top level is to cover my bases, impact deep, mercer, and after no impact, time to change after word purposes, no offensive weapons, worse than the females, and no confident opportunity, future application, missile where has no any pack war, making 20 years of ability to interfere work and by president, caution doctor, lecture, eliminating, interfere, escalation, from to the other family, but by prime minister, military sponsor, rework, and police calibration, 19 cautions, need to avoid escalation, remain fire, side pregnant, food down, company, 20, because single, and there's no entanglement in that for over 21, you have to social version tech over loneliness, because what the launcher, you have to go there, and any other users, have to see purpose, not going to have that, century users, you want to use of modern we emerging text level for religion, urban dynamics, urban dominated, urban punishment comes. This side works also get the launch on warning stuff. Their hind card goes NEG, proves no launch on warning the policies. We keep saying strike on 24 other changing China policies, including improve the church's strategies changing. Launch on warning China official day, public provide the news, last decision made, early warning systems used for missile defense, little weapon in China. Expensive to after develop first strike, even if China is modernized, defending section for second strike capability, not as for a sophisticated balance strategy, evidence building such an arsenal. Now the internal link, this is a logical China modernization. It's not internal desires for capabilities, political factors, seeking gains. Their evidence is U.S. observers who are assuming that China cares about the U.S. more than internal policy. That is wrong. The days of the U.S. altering China policy is past. This reduces the evidence in specific lines. Fears of non-development drive modernization. For 2022 years in military in China second strike. To take form by 90 government, the individual high precision measure ISR, China River, BB, exception of the nuclear BB, river that second strike, including more white Chinese, control high precision weapon for the other possible to produce your high China before setting down weapon development and the function today, enabling conventional counterforce. Mark a conventional counterforce, the relations advantage. I don't need to read impact D here. Disadvantage is terrible. A broad nuclear no-go deal is unlikely. All of evidence assumes the U.S. is seeking engagement with China, but they dropped the Rogan card. They said, made concessions. This isn't the argument. It's that Biden doesn't want to engage with North Korea, which was dropped. Means even when he offers the plan, he doesn't reciprocate. All of their evidence is about China getting to the table, but they have no evidence in the context of the U.S. getting to the negotiation table, which starts the advantage at zero. It also proves that counterplan is not better because the counterplan has the U.S. go to the table. Biden's insistence on complete denuclearization will block a deal. Bakers were completely focused on disarmament when he was policies and our no advantage. Simply as in the card expert reviews, every one has no related bank or responsibility of official checks to secure office policy. Does not align with Biden resistance adjustment. Yeah, plus the deal's impossible. They just said concerns. Those are not responsive to the ways the no-go feels, and they don't have a warrant for why sanctions change can post-nuclear tests.
Okay, you ready for cross-sex?
I am.
The plank on the counterplan that has the U.S. engage in a negotiating team to work with the DPRK, why would they just unilaterally denuclearize? Because we've been asking them to denuke for a long time.
You mean on the no-go blank?
Yeah.
So it lists a couple of things. Ken talks. It would, similar to the AFF, result in a sanction package, but also could result in other things such as China bringing diplomatic pressure. What?
A U.S. sanction.
U.S.,
right.
China, Japan, South Korea.
Why would China cooperate if we had another NEG first?
What?
Why would China say yes and cooperate with that?
Sure.
Why would counterplan?
The Kim card says that they would be willing to engage because they're concerned about North Korean nuclear threats. Second, I read a card that answers this like NFU is magic words phrasing. We have done negotiations with China in the past, proven by Lincoln Summit. They have said these things, but privately told officials as well as publicly said they're willing to
asked China
negotiate.
to sanction. If China really is so concerned about North Korean nuclear weapons, why aren't they sanctioning them now? Or why are they saying no when the U.S. asks them to sanction North Korea?
Sure, couple things. One is we think it has to do with the differentiation in how those sanction packages function, i.e. there are disagreements about what should be sanctioned. Kim says by negotiating with China over where to sanction, we can do targeted sanctions that avoid those discrepancies, i.e. if we want to sanction oil, but they want to sanction like wheat prices, etc., those could differ. Second is the counterplan also has allies get involved, so South Korea, Japan. It also talks about countries like NATO being involved in the sanction package, which means even if China doesn't get to board, it would result in a large sanction package that can't have an effect. Because we have
evidence that says that China's key to get on board because they're NOTO's largest trading partner. Do you have a piece of evidence for joining that argument?
We have the Kim card that says it would be effective.
Okay, what operational changes would the counterplan make to change that the risk reduction team proposes that would make China convinced we are not going to damage them?
Sure. So at the very least, it could be things like changing alert posture, adding in safeguards, communicating, increasing hotlines, but also other factors such as internal policy, outlining escalation scenarios, changing forward posture.
Why does that convince China that we're not about to use our ICBMs to execute a damage limitation strike on them? It's not about accidents. It's like China literally thinks they're modernizing because they literally think we're about to first strike.
Well, because it, one, tells China what the source of that modernization is. Two, outlines why it's happening and the strategic contingencies for doing so. And three, if your warrants are... Here's the important part.
They care about the U.S. first strike.
Here's the important part, and the reason why the way that Tracy answered this counterplan was wrong is the risk reduction teams will find those factors and then adopt them. I.e., if they determine de-alerting is what needs to be done.
China doesn't give a shit if the U.S. is de-alerted.
No, but the point is, you have dropped a plank that says that the risk reduction teams will identify the Chinese concerns and then adapt a policy to avoid those concerns.
Is that we will use an ICBM to damage them. Does the counterplan get rid of our ICBMs?
I don't, it depends if you win that concern, but.
Okay, one more piece.
I don't think so, because you have no evidence in that.
Let me just make sure it's the right one.
Can we prep before the webinar, actually?
You can do whatever you want.
7:58. Uh, 7:39.
Okay. One hour set. It's the Rondier, the color field. Kansas City. No.
Everyone here will concede that NSA some push no external offense of the page and will concede that there's no middle weeds or there's no external offense of the page. Speaker can't get any new classifications of 1 year. The assurance is set. Nuclear proliferation outweighs acquisitions for arms racing and regional buildup that inflate tensions between dyads and exponentially increase the risk of miscalculated conflicts spiraling to nuclear war that surround each new nuclear state is independent risk for nuclear war and terrorist acquisition of nuclear materials, books, and multiple 16 warnings. States of high probability methodologies for missiles. Tournament misses nuclear one will fail official panic. Terrorist execution missiles like all increases in war, even in a rational world. Prolific allies spread to United States, not allies say create doomsday posture that locks escalation building interest notable posture because like on your capacity and possession not deter attack new states not rational opinion before neighbors nuclear rights but not pursue security and not be risk averse to add leakage to nuclear states. The DA turns the case one, it turns crisis stability and modernization. SOCO's proximity to China locks in devastating arms racing instability and escalation. Kim 23 SOCO's and when the key was to get China's transmission can utterly oppose to do whatever required increasing arsenal to prevent it from happening. SOCO acquisitions first Chinese modernization and disincentivizes North Korea negotiations on arsenal bans for the orders. Korean army for accidents leads to success rate war China might respond to their speeding level secret programs don't be less time to negotiate themselves. Arsenal 2 relations 40,000 troops on China's border now have a nuclear asset which China would use inherently escalatory invites proxy tensions between North and South Korea which would draw great powers working 23 SOCO. Arsenal introduced new nuclear coalition referendum with PRK running a missiles and continental reach continental US including high temptation as European to attack eliminating new capability against them. Friction between mouse powers like exacerbate messaging dynamics and perceptions. 2EC1 is the permanent. It links 1 and still doesn't NFU which breaks allied assurance which will be more than link debate 2 even if the counterpoint assures Korea the inclusion of the apps and breaks 2 power motion 16 and prevents conflict from Pyongyang and has weapons threatening the seal for the US though the US possesses by non-nuclear options and North Korean attack any indication US very frequent guarantees sugar works case the US not shooting NFU should suggest the US first nuclear use US should remove the NFU too far that the US should engage in Korea in consultation about deterrence economic security balance by adversaries and their mal-evidence of the NTG is qualitatively different from existing assurances and directly addresses Korean concerns. He also thinks the counterpoint solves which they conceded out of the 2EC amount 24 commitment to consult as most promising set quantitatively different to existing assurances because they'll not directly address concerns that will not have input idea. Legally, the activity would compare nuclear and non-nuclear options bringing the alliance addition to nukes is straightforward use of reiterate existing mechanisms to ensure that they contain not only nuclear but efficient from other across the interagency evidence conventional capabilities. Now they say circle pull up now. 1. The SCAR does not assume the status quo. It says that South Korea would be incentivized to proliferate in a world where Trump wins. They have not proven that they have the capacity or intention to proliferate in the status quo. 2. It's all about the uniqueness kind of plan, and I'm not reading any new evidence here because the 2EC does the straight drop the warrant. The nuclear planning with clarification to allies when nukes would be used to emphasize conventional nuclear planning, which solves the risk of proliferation and all of their uniqueness arguments, which should filter how you view the 1 hour. They're going to blow this shit up because they know they fucked up, but they do not get any new answers. Now, the conventional failings argument. 1. Conventional fails. I'll do the link right here. China interviews first East Asian allied prolifics perceived as bargaining away U.S. cyber is 180 from current policy that no amount of reassurance can compensate for that since World War I, Korea, the RK is deeply concerned about China, the placing confidence and mutual vulnerability, since assurance exchange by you. MD countries have global China lead to aggressive
behavior reaching become computational measures, set economic traits, concerning alcohol. Of course, I mentioned over the LC, social groups, pieces such as Celsius and creating evidence about where you are and how to push that. No go watching those committed providing illustrations for innovating the event, continues to percent by trans infection with problematic and serious concern about youth command going down about guaranteeing regional security. And these Soko would run their reviews was compared to Japan Soko. 2. Emotional vulnerabilities, first championing Japan's nuclear weaponization, and they consider the internal link out of the 1 and C. Thinking about the same as 21. Japanese churches avert as long as the U.S. extended church and critical nuclear breakout would not be in Japan's interest use. If the U.S. produces down option would be to become nuclear, would gain understanding of weapon, understanding and support of other countries to prevent weakening of extended deterrence officials. Lobbying against NEG storage against acknowledging enemy with China and Japan. Public immersion in nukes has diminished. 3. Perception alone is sufficient. Cost of 22. Alice react negatively to envy worry. U.S. touchly signaling vulnerability to coercion and regional scenarios. Alice question. Commitments to aid militarily. Reality vulnerability not less for assurance. Perception the U.S. acknowledges vulnerability and the evil consultations comes an unwelcome surprise. Caution. The sealed new declaration by China, China, and conventional fail and proper. 1. Nuclear capabilities with the litmus test. Free station assurance. Anderson 13. New forces. A set of feature value assurance by orders of 2. Most devastating capabilities such where allies face an adversary within the U.S. It's not necessary to encounter this for the promise to contact for nukes for allies willingness to use it over nuclear war represents a critical limit set of relationship nukes playing an important role during proper conventional. Alone is in doubt. Nukes is remain prominent within assurance. Key foreign leaders trying to use nukes with visibility and flight support to East Asia allies to meet critical requirements. Classify that to the first strength that key argument. Now the second is that the uniqueness counterplans false or warrants because it re-emphasizes the nature of conventional warfare. Now they say nuclear guarantee framing issue. They've dropped uniqueness counterplan which solves all of this argument, but rejects Sukin. 1. Issued specific uniqueness disproves their terms are empirically disproven by 50 years of ambiguous first stretch and treaty commitments. 2. Their former debater creates moral hazard to read crux from coaches with degrees. 3. Sukin is not a link turn. It's about Trump trying too hard to make U.S. nuclear threats credible. Not first use threats. It agrees weakening security commitments isn't the correct path and agrees that incredible commitments increase support for independent acquisition. 4. It's only about public support. Elite opinion and comparatively outweighs to make the final decisions. It can influence public opinion, but they base their decisions on the credibility of U.S. security guarantees, which answers to indirectly. Bracket 22. Vocal gap between elites and public has been shrinking public support of nuclear weapons. Consistently 7%. Survey of Soko. Experts show 64% opposed development. Only 4% supported. Experts change pro-government voters. You can increase critical commitment to critical security commitment. Decreases support for among the public decision pursues. Motivated primarily by security threats and nuclear perceptions using nuclear posture. Different depending on posture acquisition. The high stakes policy. The high stakes decision approved by elites without support of the elites. Development would be feasible for armament subjects. Change your attitudes for response to cues from elites. Cut it at cues from elites. Now the first strike is key argument. The degree of U.S. nuclear superiority is a referendum on the credibility of U.S. assurances changes. U.S. nuclear posture are closely monitored by allies. Chronic is when nuclear superiority contributes to the credible intent of assurance helps assure allies use defend their interests in the cross vulnerable front line. Allies watch U.S. nuclear posture closely and most concerned with U.S. consider stopping U.S. nuclear doctrine or cutting nuclear forces. You'll increase the question. American commitment considering their own nuclear arsenal extended deterrence is easier.
739.
Okay, 321. I need to go to the bathroom. I will send it and then go. Wait, sorry, 321. All right, 317. No changes to the doc. Thank you.
What's the weather in Kansas like?
A little warmer than this, I think. It was pretty nice the last couple weeks.
Yeah, it was nice in East Lansing the other day.
Yeah.
70.
Wow, that's nice.
Yeah. Terrified, but nice for a day, I guess.
Yeah, where are you from?
I'm from California.
Okay. So is the cold kind of a shock to the system?
Yeah. So I didn't realize that, like, so I don't know. I was overconfident. I was like, it's not gonna be that bad.
Sure.
And I didn't realize that, like, people actually wear, like, undershirts and stuff. So it was like one of the first days where it was below 20, and like the wind and stuff. And my ears were frozen.
Yeah.
I had like a cold headache.
Yeah. Oh, I hate this.
My legs were like bright red. Like I looked like a lobster. It was really bad.
Some real Yankee crosstalk going on now.
You might not want to look at the kill up in Montreal then, hey?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I want to get up to Canada though. I want to see a Blue Jays game.
Montreal's a fabulous place. Do you speak French?
I do not.
Neither did I.
What's going on?
Just talking about the weather.
Trauma bonding.
That is a,
It's like, you get sun. We don't get sun.
You don't get sun?
We don't get sun.
I guess like there's some differences between one and another.
Yeah, there's some pretty big differences.
Would you say you noticed?
Here and there.
Where is buried in the sun? He listens to the I forget his name, some psychologist who's really into big like sun. Yeah, sun's like a
Big
real
vitamin D.
Yeah, yeah.
No, the thing that really tripped me about like the difference is when I went back to LA for spring break, it was like fully raining every single day.
Oh yeah, it was, yeah.
It was like really like,
I don't know, I'm sure other places get this too, but seasonal depression is like a real thing in Michigan. Like the sun goes away for like 2 months and we all start taking vitamin D pills, it's weird. No, like I take vitamin D.
Oh, that's
like it's like a thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Atlanta has so much weather.
Yeah.
There's so much rain, it's cold.
There's some like that.
Yeah, it's so different. I imagine Michigan may be even more different.
Michigan, maybe more weather.
Yeah, like,
Well,
in the course of
Atlanta has
3
the
days.
most seasonal change of anywhere I've ever lived by far. It's like not close.
It was
It's like by far the
Yeah.
coolest place I've ever lived. By far the like darkest
it
and
was
like
like,
in August and we were getting like humidity, like tornadoes.
yeah. So JP, in the course of 3 days, we had a 78-degree day, a 40-degree rain day and raining, and a 20-degree day where it was snowing.
And there was one with tornado.
Yeah, we should do 1 hour. Did we? I don't know. I think there might be a more pressing environmental issue that we should discuss. Yeah.
New news sheet, we need a self-living.
Yeah, maybe we should get that.
Advantage is 1, 2, 3. Got a counter plan. Hello. Good. Is anyone not ready?
NFU is credible, we only have to win. It's more credible than a first use strat one principle, the sanctity of the nuclear taboo, enables Chinese buy-in even without enforcement and forced planning. That's I2. China has asked for a declaratory policy, proves that they value the declaration because they wouldn't ask for something that they don't value. That's Xiao, past empirics are constructive. China believes in NFU even if the US doesn't third the plan fiat to no US first use, which is coming now. Mutual trust is not a prerequisite because the plan kickstarts it and spills over via by facilitating follow-on measures. That's Tulaki and Gompert, Newton, Reed, and either rehabilitates in the 1 and C. Yes, China warned. The round is too specific to deliberate aggression. This calc supersedes it because leaders don't weigh the cost and benefits of going to war when they think they're under attack. They drop. The US will provoke war by overreacting to salami slices. By salami slicing, economics don't track for the above reasons. Biden will strike first because of the NPR and audience costs. It would cause massive casualties, which creates pressure for asymmetric escalation. Advantage 2. They've dropped an AI impact. It causes false warnings and glitches because algorithms will mistake launches for a first strike. You can see no Indo-Pac impact not going for it. Launch on warning gives nuclear him. It goes AFF because it says China is shifting in that direction. They just haven't done it yet, which proves it's preventable. Yes, internal China is responding to the US NPR and attempting to secure a second strike. We only need to explain launch on warning. Even if other incentives drive modernization in general, those capabilities are driven because they're dangerous. They're driven by first use, no conventional cause because they can't zero China's arsenal. Team says that their new silos are out of range of current conventional missiles. Advantage 3, try or die to stop nuclear advantages, otherwise tactical nuclear alliances and cause first use. Biden wants to engage. The plan makes it easy to be a huge foreign policy win. They're on the scope descriptive. Biden doesn't want to engage now because he knows it won't work. Sanctions solved because they provide sufficient leverage. China is nuclear's largest trading partner and only source of energy. That's our key evidence. Advantage counter plan. I'm going to read off of Soper's computer now. Turn to both. Double solvency. Sufficiency is wrong. Assume the deficit outweighs the net benefit instead. Doesn't solve advantage 1 or 2. China fears a disarming first strike on accident. The 1 and C counterplan text just says risk reduction teams are involved. D alerting. Talking with China. None of that is sufficient to solve their fears of a disarming deliberate first strike without a credible NFU. The counterplan isn't fiat. We get rid of our ICBM. So without NFU, China will keep modernizing to maintain the survivability of their arsenal. And doesn't solve advantage 3. Both 1EC and 2EC Kulaki say NFU is correct to any talks or organizations over NOCO. Countryman and Zhao says China refuse every initiative over the use commits. Framing issue, the counterplan asks China for favors without reciprocating. Negotiating with NOCO over denuclearization is the SQUO, and they continue to say no because they don't view the US as a threat. The only way to achieve durable reductions in the arsenal and prevent their 3 and first use is massive Chinese sanctions threatening to destroy their economy. Their evidence empirically disproven by the US asking China for sanctions on NOCO and then refusing. Our Kim and Snyder card says getting China on board is key because they're NOCO's largest trading partner. NOCO says no because they're being sanctioned now by the US and allies and their economy hasn't collapsed. The US first strike plank doesn't solve Chinese first use, which is what every advantage is about.
So the competition subtomicality.
Competition subtomicality. We meet our interp.
And it's competition, not tomicality.
And it's competition, not
I can't say
tomicality.
it's competition.
Like should certainty, immediacy, distinction, but counterplan's not for DS.
Yep.
Go back to the first advantage. I'm going to read another credibility card. Chapter 20. U.S. could adopt an any food return effect U.S. China's fear for about strike, and if you would call further country without such things, even U.S. reform, and if you address Chinese concerns. Prologue. US-China war outweighs prolif because of arsenal size and the planned durably fiats the US won't use first, which solves other impacts. It doesn't solve modernization because China has a large enough arsenal that SOCO wouldn't be threatening. It can't turn relations because we wouldn't be responsible for SOCO prolif. It wouldn't get blamed. To do both solves their offense. It ensures allies get a say in our nuclear policy and over other domains of policy because they've also fiat that we do planning over conventional stuff. They dropped NFU is not certain or immediate on the counterplan, so we could do it after consultation. That's awkward. Their Bush evidence does not assume consultation, and they have not read a card that assumes that. Now, alliance collapse now. SOCO's faith and public faith in the security guarantee is plummeting. They can never be certain we use a nuclear defense, making reassurance a bottomless pit magnified by future isolationists. That's now SOCO's perception of the commitment is low now. Vantage 23. North Korea's nuclear ambitions, North Korea's nuclear policy, the South wants nuclear weapons, policymakers is full. I've been interested in their extent insurance Ukraine. Especially with the innocence reaction. Extent insurance was abusively enough. We're going to some people just that buying. Extent insurance guarantees remain. Other value this harmful self-manufactured insurance responsibility for currently pushing the ADA and just the possibility. So
Gabriel doesn't think first use is credible, $23 South Korea, Gabriel, I think weapons big so it's root of the relative US security part of the war stats or trial program, and it's created more really raises the question about whether this really sacrifice the end of the state role when faced with nuclear retaliation. They need to have a card that Stupek believes would use nukes in their defense. Forget about overall relations or ties, because that's what the only thing that is connected to the lake. The counterplan doesn't solve that for reasons that I'll explain on our link turn below. Also, the 1 in 8 didn't include anything about Japan, so Japan 12 now, given 12.8. Japan does not have nuclear weapons with records of your dots of the ocean. Japan offer to cover the review conditions to nuclear allergy of the rate. I think presentation question the relativity of nuclear available to assumptions public news and little details about trends. The trends all seem to be pointing in one direction. Controlling turn allies don't want the US to first strike China. They fear being pulled in a rash US-driven escalation. The republics are less hawkish than the US. The counterplan doesn't solve this because it doesn't give allies a veto over nuclear use. It just consults them. Sole authority is vested in DC, not Seoul. Being a former debater is not an argument. Sukin is not a coach currently and has a PhD. Fuck off. Our evidence isn't just about Trump because it was written during the Biden administration. It would fracture even robust alliances to make a radical nuclear threat. 16. Allies want to be really control this ethical rejection of anything using first house later escalating. So allies are making them nervous. You're going to start a war on our behalf. The way that the result of the contribution, I would love nuclear weapons. Be sure allies good. We also want to make it easier allies to come with these warmongering cowboys. It creates excitement. Allies acting that cowboys can fracture even our Muslim alliances when you can unity. Our evidence also says that the link turn is statistically proven, which you should prefer over their speculative links. Salience link turn. Peddling first use as the solution to allied security threats reinforces the political capital of hawks arguing for pro-life, and if you solve that, Bill 15 from the rest of the people with 1 to 2 states as security nuclear recent studies under after the massive proliferation in the next decades, the weapons for the atomic matching factoring first proliferation rational for the leadership of the nuclear mission and if you see the next step, decrease the lines of the weapons reducing the scope of the mission. Public opinion matters and outweighs the leaks. 20 public opinion matters to release a certificate of democracy later. No anticipation of public opinion also plays to affect the little leaders, public opinion strain or Germany and public opinion active for states with nuclear experiences most likely to engage in hedging are transparent. Now, retaliation is good enough to shield the link, which is all of our 2DC evidence, which says the nuclear umbrella would maintain post-app.
Alright, 550. Okay. Y'all good for order? Yeah. Okay. Advantage counterplan. Assurances disad. Crisis stability advantage. Modernization advantage. Relations advantage. Kansas, y'all ready?
We are ready.
Judges, y'all ready?
Yeah.
The kid is like, whoa, that was excited. It's an ELF, let's go. All right, let's do it.
Let's go.
I don't know why this keeps happening, but Kansas dropped topicality on the assurance DA. They said interview is not certain or immediate, which was our violation for the FSA card. I.e., we were not saying you couldn't be a policy to individual countries, but that you couldn't be a conditional interview. They have dropped all of our standards. One, after conditionality, they conceded and encourages 3C sandbagging, which allows them to redefine and pick out a counterplan groups, all possible negative ground because it changes things. Second, they dropped limits. It allows infinite possible contingencies where you can define any possible circumstance. I.e., you could be like, we won't use force against China in the event of a Taiwan invasion, against an incursion in the SCS, against North Korea if they invade the DPRK, or if they blow up a nuclear test, etc. They dropped it in impacts ground because it allows you to identify particular circumstances. Like we wouldn't use first with nukes in Japan in the event of a Taiwan conflict, etc. Obviously, there's no negative ground to that. Blows up things like the NEG. All these who drop standards, last week precision. They have no gain on this question. They didn't extend an interp. They just said we need it's game over. You obviously don't because it was flagged as a T argument for conditions, which is i.e. you don't define circumstances, not different countries. There's no possible way they could cross that things. We agree that it can be individual countries, not circumstances. There's use any kind of 2-hour ground argument. They need to stop dropping topicality. That's an easy way. But we also beat them on substance. Sufficiency framing is good, is how you should evaluate a counterplan solvency, especially in the context of weighted advantage counterplans, because in the case of case defense, which is different than their framing issue, judge case is also a logical extension of conditionality, which means if you think for some reason it links, it's just also a solvency question, so you could judge it, they didn't contest conditionality, but so that's obviously also irrelevant. The shooting argument wasn't even extended, but if it was, it's illogical. Obviously, the counterplan does not result in an NFU, which is distinction now. It solves the entirety of the case versus any accident scenarios. They conceded it upgrades survivability, which their own Valcarn evidence says important because it allows us to engage in a different factor. Second is risk reduction team. They said we need to communicate with China, otherwise it doesn't matter. They have dropped the risk reduction team. Results are given to China, which means they understand we've engaged in modernization efforts or adopted our policy the way to be perceived as less accusatory. They have no reason why that would not be believed in incapacity. But if they win, it's not believed. The NFU would also obviously not be believed because it's a question of trust and credibility. And insofar as there's a mutual kind of difference here, the counterplan will be perceived as more credible because it's an independent risk reduction team disclosing the findings, not the U.S. government. We have reason why they don't trust the U.S. government for the case base. You know that trust can only go negative. They said it doesn't solve the third advantage. It definitely does. And if it's not the prerequisite, they dropped the Zao card that China will say yes to negotiations even if the is not on the table, which means they come to the negotiating table. They also dropped the Kim card that the unique combination of sanctions from allies, etc., sufficient to solve North Korea and get them to the negotiating table. But if an agreement was impossible, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, and they couldn't solve it. The first use asked for favor stuff. This is the same reception, which we equally link back to them because it's a notion of trust. This appears to prove that is wrong. We haven't engaged in comprehensive sanction packages, and they conceded the 2&C cross-sex analysis about the ways that these sanction packages would be tailored, which obviously proves largest trading partner. That's why China's on board, which means it obviously solves assurances. Japanese probe evaluation and cost extinction. It was in the 1&C, so they don't get any new answers. And all of the 2&C analysis was either way general, not in the context of China in view, or was not about Japan to go. They've conceded it causes nuclear terror because they steal nukes. That spills over and causes extinction, which means there's 100% of the disadvantage. It confirms the case. Japan proliferation puts a nuclear partner on China's doorstep, obviously causes them to increase modernizing, prevents them from coming to a negotiation deal, and undermines crisis stability, which means it turns the case in a faster fashion. They conceded that prolif would be nearly immediate because our link card from the 2&C about Japan was conceded, and it rushes to engage, which means it turns modernization. That can only go one way. They can't turn the case because modernization, they concede it's an inevitable process, but this is a question of how they should modernize and speed, which was their own warrant term. The uniqueness counterplan. It is the straw that will break Kansas's back. The 1AR too late to manufacture reason the counterplan wouldn't solve their link terms. It increases nuclear contingency planning with South Korea incorporates conventional planning into what the U.S. and South Korea will do. It gives control, it gives South Korea say in the event of what a nuke would be. They drop their mile cutting that says even if nuclear terms isn't credible, the solution isn't in view. It also solves salience. The reason for the winning this argument is that disproven the warrant South Korea believes believes the nuclear guarantee under the alliance for a part of them. 4-1 on the questions if their cards are specific to South Korea. 3, they drop a D into the firm. The Bush card was flagged. It says NFU is viewed as a clear contradiction to South Korea after affirming nuclear threats, which based off the analysis, they conceded Soviet Pearl have also caused extinction. But you may be asking, why are you extending this uniqueness counterplay if you're going mostly for Japan? It's because all of the link term cards they read are about general NFU. That should be the framing issue. You should evaluate link cards based on specificity about China NFU. We're the only ones reading it in the context of both South Korea and Japan. And the link frame is all of these cards are quotes, things like if the U.S. is acting like cowboys, if the U.S. is unclear, if they're acting erratic, etc. The counterclaim proves that they're not doing that, and the advantage counterclaim for it as well, because we're engaging in risk reduction efforts, we're consulting with South Korea, etc. I.e., the U.S. is engaging with different actions that solve their link terms because they're not perceived as erratic. They conceded that first use threats and allies perceive them valuably, which means there's 100% risk of our offense. The SOCA perception stuff is obviously irrelevant to Japan, no cross applications here. Yeah, I don't know if I need anything else.
Do the first terms case one.
The modernization one, I did that above, but they conceded the Kim card. It lost in arms racing, which also causes miscalculation in the short term.
Say link alone terms case.
Oh, sure, yeah, and the link alone turns the case. They dropped a card and warned about why it would mean you hold the line there. Not only turns modernization stability, but even the pursuit of pro-lift would obviously cause a decrease in crisis stability, increase modernization efforts, undermine North Korea threats, and probably cause North Korea to invade South Korea to try to prevent it, which means we turn case on time, crisis stability. Thank you for saying China should ask for the value. That is why we said mutual trust is a prerequisite, and you conceded the newest card that says they would never trust us, i.e. the plan does not increase mutual trust because they would never believe us. Look, their whole solvency claim is based on, oh, we do what China wants. China wouldn't believe we were actually doing what they would want. Based on their own analysis, per their own, the trust card, they will, at best, China will perceive it as us trying to co-opt them to avoid modernization, which means you know for sure that declarative exchanges fail. It's impacted out with Imperial, which is the Costco card, which is something they have no game on. China war, econ, obviously global backlash, etc. Sanctions are warrants they conceded, which means it would never escalate the modernization advantage. China's fears are not one nuclear. We've read multiple pieces of evidence that they're based on internal factors, and they conceded it. They fear about non-conventional weapons, which mean they would never respond. And lastly, the relations advantage. They conceded Biden doesn't want to engage, which means sanctions are irrelevant because he never comes to the negotiation table. That was conceded in the 2EC, which means this advantage is also 0.
Restart. Order is advantage 2, which is modernization advantage. Then the crisis stability advantage. Then the relations advantage. Or the marketing advantage. Then the counter plan, and then the disadvantage.
Crisis stability, modernization, relations, counter plan, VA.
Yes. Okay, ready?
China modernization increases the risk of Chinese accident causing them to unintentionally launch a nuclear weapon because they adopted things like LOW and modernize their nuclear arsenal. They have no impact defense to this claim. They only have solvency arguments that China will continue modernizing because they care about conventional weapons and because the U.S. NFU is incredible. This is try or die for the affirmative if we win a solvency deficit. To the counterplay these, you know that China will continue modernizing in a world where they fear a U.S. disarming first strike. They made 2 arguments on the page. The first was the internal factors. The internal factors that China cares about is those internal factors are influenced by fears of the U.S.-China first strike. The next argument is that they care about conventional weapons. Conventional weapons can't execute a disarming first strike because China has a far too large an arsenal and far nuclear weapons in far too many areas like underground, etc. That conventional bombs like a tomahawk wouldn't be sufficient to execute a disarming first strike, which is why nuclear weapons and nuclear no first use policy is absolutely essential to convince China that to stop modernizing their arsenal, not adopt things like LOW, which are destabilizing and cause extinction. They also dropped the Chinese going to integrate AI into their arsenal in a short time frame that causes accidents because any blip on an AR's radar will cause China to dump their arsenal onto the United States because they think they're imminently under attack. It increases the risk of accidents and far outweighs the disadvantage because our uniqueness evidence says that China is about to modernize or adopt LOW tomorrow and an accident would be imminent. The advantage 1, credibility. I'm not going for this advantage problem, but I'm answering credibility. We've dropped a slew of words that were in both the 2EC and the 1AR. The I evidence says that the principle of NFU is something that China believes in, which means they think the U.S. would reciprocate. The Benedict and government evidence says that the follow-up dialogue that happens will convince China that the U.S. is certain because that follow-up dialogue could include things like operational changes, even if that's not a mandated plan. The done evidence says that it cites Chinese officials that says that they view things like a U.S. NFU as credible, and why would they believe it's credible if they keep asking for it? China hasn't asked for any operational changes. They just want the U.S. to commit to an NFU, and the U.S. has not done so. Why would they ask for that if they didn't actually believe in it? They say impact defense to China, the econ, global backlash, etc. Not all of that goes out the window if China thinks their security is imminently under threat, i.e. if they think the U.S. is literally attacking them, or it'll blip on their radar and make them think that they're under attack, or cause them to launch a nuke accidentally. None of those things constrain that decision calculus. Now, advantage 3, not going for it, that might engage in nuclear talks. The advantage counter plan. First, we did not drop topicality. The thing I had Graham say at the very bottom of the counter plan answers this, that competition is not topicality in 1AC prospects. They asked if the plan was certain and immediate. We said it was for disadvantages, but not for counterplans, i.e. making the delay counterplan automatically competitive in 1AC cross-sects, or the consult NATO counterplan, or the do the plan under certain condition counterplan competitive in 1AC cross-sects is obviously unreasonable and not a reason we violate this topicality argument. They conceded that competition is not topicality in the 1AR, and that distinction proves that and that we conceded in the 1AR that whatever counterplan that is sufficient for that we conceded their competition arguments in the 1AR that proves that they could have gone for whatever parts of the counterplay they were saying were competitive based off of the certainty of the plan, which means we don't need to answer any of their standards because we meet their interpretation, and that the plan it does not allow any options for conditions and is still certain and immediate, i.e. post-affirmative plan. China knows that there are no conditions under which the U.S. can use nuclear weapons first against them. The counterplan proper, it does not solve any of the modernization stuff, particularly because China is afraid of accidents or risk reduction, or the U.S. accidentally launching a nuclear weapon. They're afraid of the U.S. intentionally launching a nuclear weapon and executing a damage limitation strike on them, which is why China would adopt things like LOW and integrate AI because that lowers the decision time that they have to use to make a decision, and it convinces the U.S. said to not execute a disarming first strike. That is why all of the risk reduction nonsense or cards that China wants the counterplan, all of that might be true, but they still fear disarming first strike absent credibly convincing them that the U.S. is not going to do so, which means all of their evidence and all of their counterplan more credible stuff is totally irrelevant and is answered on the yes credible page. It does not link, the counterplan is not more credible than the affirmative because the counterplan doesn't assure China that it will not execute a disarming first strike, which is the thing that they care most about. Now, the disadvantage, they didn't answer Japan prologue inevitable. One AR going says Japan is destined to have nuclear weapons because the American nuclear umbrella is inherently unreliable. Public support for breakout is surging, and Ukraine convinced elites they need nukes to defend themselves from nuclear armed aggressors. This ensures the inevitability of their stuff since they've only gone for Japan prologue, which means you have a categorical preference for AFF offense. The 2NR didn't answer it, and concessions are taken as truth. The 2NR needed to flag it as new, but regardless, we have two justifications for this. One, a new emphasis on Japan in the bloc. It was highlighted maybe once in their card. Their evidence was generic and not contextualized to Japan's threat perceptions. Two, the bloc also read new uniqueness and link cards by Japan prolif, so new cards justify reciprocal evidence to answer them. The MSU has not read a piece of evidence that Japan believes we would use a nuke on their behalf. This argument was applied to South Korea in the 1AR, but equally applies to Japan. 2AC Mountain and 1AR Going say extent deterrence can never be credible because Solar 30 is vested in the American president, not Japan. They can never be confident America will be first to defend them. The 2NR concedes this makes allied anxieties a bottomless pit. Shuffling more assurances into that pit just increases their appetite for nukes because it perpetuates the fiction that security is dependent on nuclear use. Our scenario is faster than the Turin's case analysis, and all of their Turin's case arguments don't make any sense. It's contextualized to modernization, but even if Japan acquires nuclear weapons, China doesn't think they would damage them if they acquire nuclear weapons, so they would need to modernize in response to that. The uniqueness counterplan doesn't solve any of this. It's specific to South Korea, and it doesn't solve any of our salience links. Our link turns are their evidence is specific to South Korea, but our link turns are not the control link turn. Why would Japan want the U.S. to first strike China? That is the fundamental contradiction at the heart of the assurance is that allies fear getting drawn into a nuclear conflict on behalf of the United States. That makes them pull away from the alliance and focus more on acquiring their own arsenal, so they have control over their own nuclear futures regardless of the counterplan's consultation. Sole authority lies in D.C., not Seoul. The 2AC Stupek says that as the credibility of VRC increases, so does support for proliferation, which is what our Peloponnese evidence of the NEG is the key first step to reducing that salience and convincing allies that the U.S. is not about to start a nuclear war with China.
Good video.
Wait.
Got a nice handshake.
Nick,
Pleasure.
The decision is a 2-1 for the affirmative for the okay, so I sat. The reason I voted NEG is because I did not think that the counterplan really needed to solve all that much of the case, given how large I thought the DA was. I think that if I thought the DA was smaller, then I probably would have voted the other way. So I think that the link alone turns the case. I thought that NEG explanation of the specific reaction of allies to an NFU towards China's spring proliferation was persuasive, and there wasn't enough 2AR reframing about how I should read cards for me to change my mind about that. There's some independent, like, new terror stuff that I think the 2AR hasn't answered, which is existential, which means that as long as there's a risk of a link, and if there's a risk that the link indicates solvency, that's enough to result in an existential DA. I thought that it turns crisis stability and modernization fairly cleanly. China re-ups in the face of new prolif in the region, causes more security risks, undermines stability, creates more ambiguity. This indicates to like AI impact modernization, the 2AR flags that is dropped as well. And I think the uniqueness counter plan solves some risk of the link turn. It makes the US seem more stable, rational, credible, etc. I think that the risk of nuclear now is pretty low. And even if there's a risk of a link turn, all of it presumes trust, which I think the NEG explanation was persuasive on as being structurally impossible, that the China will never perceive US first use as credible. The NEG evidence isn't really about first use, it seems to be about US and China relations in general. I thought that a 2AR that would have made a lot of sense to me would have been to say that the structural trust stuff zeroes every single plank of the counterplans that got extended, but it's not zero the AF, because the way that an NFU would be perceived is different based on AF evidence. So it's like, it means there's no shot that the counterplan can solve the case, but there's still some risk that the case solves an impact, and then you go for like try or die. Nuclear war is certain in the status quo because trust is zero, which means that like anything to rebuild it and create mutual vulnerability is like worth attempting. I think that 2AR is one that I maybe thought was coming, and I almost certainly would have voted for, but it wasn't the 2AR that came together for me. But I'm sure Johnnie and Gabe have a lot of thoughts too that hold very smart. So that's how I thought things.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I would AF. I think that AF is conclusively winning a link turn to Japan in particular, which is most important to me because like the vast majority of 2NR impact calc is just about like Japan getting a nuke specifically. So I think Japan prolif is basically inevitable in the status quo based on this 1AR card. I think it's justified. I think this card is like stupidly conclusive that like Japan is like inevitably going to get a nuclear weapon in the status quo. And the 2NR just does not really say anything about this piece of evidence. And there's not really another just like conclusive, like yes, no, is Japan going to get a nuke now piece of evidence in the debate. Which means that I conclude it's kind of just like try or die for like the link turn to just like de-emphasize the salience of nuclear weapons in the alliance. I think the AF is like winning definitively in the context of Japan, that just like expansive nuclear commitments just like sort of makes the alliance more dependent on nuclear weapons in general. And that NFU decreases the salience of nuclear weapons by just like de-emphasizing them in the alliance structure, which is this like hello Pinus card that they have in the 2AC. Like, is there a chance that NFU is a shock to Japan and that like it increases abandonment fears? Like, absolutely yes, but I think that like based on this evidence, Japan is already going to get a nuke in the status quo. So it's probably better to just like risk like playing hardball with them and just like de-emphasize the role of nuclear weapons in the alliance to reduce the possibility that just like Japan feels like they need a nuclear weapon to defend themselves. Counterplan, I think, would resolve this link turn, but it doesn't solve the link turn for Japan because it only fiats just like increase like nuclear coordination stuff with South Korea. I think if the counterplan just like does that stuff over Japan as well, then I think it definitely solves the link turn. And then at that point, I'm definitely like with PKP, just like neg any risk of a link. But because the counterplan is not about South Korea, it's just like, I think that like, you know, it's better to just take this like one.
Can I ask you a question here?
Yeah.
Should it have been SOCO Pro in the 2NR?
I mean, I think so, yeah, because it's like, I think that you're doing really well in this link turn in conjunction with the counterplan for the context of SOCO, but it's like, if I'm mostly just worried about Japan because the 2NR like flags Japan pro-left as being the thing that is scary and causes nuclear terrorism, I think it's like kind of just drag back to the link turn.
Well, I guess my one question about that is, like, what evidence do you think they've read that suggests the link turn applies to Japan?
I think their evidence is generic and says that the link turn applies to just like both countries. So like this, the 2AC, I definitely checked that in the post round. Like the 2AC mount card, mount 23 is definitely about South Korea, but I think the Stein 16 and the Teledatas 15 card are both just like generically about just like NFU and like decreasing the salience of nukes in just like alliances, making allies want nukes less. I think that paired with the specific uniqueness card is like Japan's going into
Yeah,
specificity.
I get that part. I guess the other half of that is, why did you think that answers were justified?
I mean, like the 1AR just like reads a card saying like they read some new cards about Japan to block. Here's a yes Japan relevant
But
card.
we read like one evidence that like it was an extension.
The 2NR, like if the 2NR gets here, it is like you should strike the stop your flow, then like I would probably be with you. But like as it is, I think it's just like,
I knew it.
yeah. I don't know. It's like I think that paired with like the 2NR decision to just like make the top level impact stuff just like about Japan is like
The wrong, yeah,
Yeah.
I knew it. Okay, Stupek.
So I agree with that. I sort of think the way that I ended up resolving it is I'm not like 100% confident that the DA is like net AF, but I did think that these like structural impact uniqueness arguments rendered the DA more or less nil, right? So it's like very confident that Japan is going to get a nuclear weapon in the status quo. That kind of renders it renders the notion that perhaps the link direction for the DA can only possibly be AF if I think that it is true that Japan is getting a nuclear weapon in the status quo. I think that they're winning, they're winning some arguments about why the control salience link turns aren't completely solved by the uniqueness counterplan, certainly in the context of Japan. And then also there's sort of an element of this, which is that they've got this sort of theoretical claim about how the incentives for nuclear proliferation increase and increase and increase in the world where we have more credible security guarantees because the ally is like, well, this nuclear ally is going to get us kind of sucked into a nuclear conflict. And so I thought that was like a theoretical claim that kind of wasn't completely solved by the uniqueness counterplan. I thought that, so I did think that there was a fairly decent solvency deficit to the counterplan, and I think that you end up in a world where, and I think that this recurs a little bit in advantage counterplan debates, where it's like, there's a plank, then the 2AC response is largely like, here's our internal link scenario, the plank doesn't address our internal link scenario, and then the block is like, well, you didn't really answer our plank, and our plank is great, but the connective tissue between risk reduction teams and resolving the internal link to nuclear modernization, which the 1AC internal links are like China fears and disarming first strike. I thought that the 1AC acting card is pretty good, but I don't think it's like so good that it sort of clearly explicates to me the process by which the counterplan ensures that China believes, okay, there's no longer going to be a disarming first strike. We don't have to worry about that. We're going to stop modernizing. And I think that just like, and it's not one of those things where you don't have the EBSET to do the explanation of the 2NR that you need to do to make the solvency deficit pretty small in this debate. But I think the 2NR needed to do more just like, here's how our counterplan plank solves their internal link, rather than just like, here's the counterplan plank that they have in red cards that are in the context of our counterplan plank. If that makes sense.
Yeah. All three judges, T shouldn't have been in the 2NR, I assume.
No, waste of time.
Okay. And that's where the time went, and that's why, yeah. I mean, in the hall I knew, I was like, if they get this card, we're hosed. If they don't get this card, I feel pretty good. So, yeah. Okay. I don't know if I have any questions. Kansas?
I don't.
Yes, I was talking to Gabe about this. I kind of thought that their counterplan said allies, not South Korea. Those kind of different. I mean, it's obviously not really your burden to be like, hey, by the way, the counterplan they went for doesn't solve the impact they've extended. But I do think that just saying that sentence would have gotten, like, I'm not suggesting it's your fault or whatever. Like, I should have reread the counterplan text, but I just at no point assumed they had extended a counterplan for a thing that they weren't for. I just kind of thought it was allies.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Why are we panels?
you know? Yeah, fair enough. I appreciate it, we appreciate your thoughtfulness. And
Yeah, so
despite that, but I think I'm good.
Well, I don't know. It's incumbent on us to point stuff
Yeah,
out.
no, I agree. Yeah, you're right. We should have flagged.
Again, like, it's really not your fault. Like, they didn't do that. So.
They were going to decision time.
Yes. Good luck, Joe.
Thank you.
Okay, I think so. Yes, and one of those impact defense arguments might be like, if it's a stalemate, that doesn't mean that they're impact or something. Like we say.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're okay. Okay, that makes sense to me. The other thing is,
If they, my biggest concern is they
they
don't.
just don't, yeah. Well, if they don't, we should talk about what we're gonna do.
We'll get out of here.
No, there's really really good tournament, by the way.
Thanks, y'all. Good luck. Yeah, it's always a pleasure, y'all. These debates are fun. I'd rather have these debates than K-debates.
I saw it on your wiki. It was like we were trying to prep for what you go for, and it's just like K-debate.
Yeah, somebody else was doing that. They were like, we were trying to track back, and it's been like 2 tournaments since you've had a policy V&A debate. It's like, yeah, kind of how we felt. I know in this tournament we had like all K AFF debates. So it was like,
How interesting.
yeah.
And then the other thing that I wanted to ask was, what's the is like deterrence. So no invasion later, because deterrence buys time for demographics to moderate Chinese policy.
John, I talked to John about that. He said it's more about like Chinese elites really want invasion to be a goal. Even if demographics, even if like the general public does not.
So that's not what it's more like the argument is, and what all our lower cards say is no invasion later. Because if we deter them now, then as China's, it's not public opinion, as China's population ages, there's a public demand to redirect welfare spending into social security and healthcare. So their policy becomes less belligerent.
And that means no invasion?
Yeah.
Well, because I'm saying, regardless of whether or not the invasion is successful, she will want to do it because security elites are pressuring him to do so.
Yeah, okay.
Is the answer to that.
But again, that's not whether the invasion is successful later. It's, I guess it's...
If they initiate, well, because our impact is about, if they initiate an invasion later, that causes the CCP to be like backlash against Xi, become destabilized, etc.
starts a nuclear war because the US gets involved and then China uses first.
It doesn't. The two cards in the 2AC that we read that say an NFU, the US can't first strike because we have an NFU.
Yeah.
And that creates, China views that as like an off-road.
Stream's been off,
They will
by
keep it
the way.
conflict commercial.
Are you serious?
Yes, I'm fully serious. I did not realize